Okay. Well, welcome everybody to this poetry reading series on Zoom presented by the Centre des Arts de Stanstead. My name is Shelly Pomerance. Je vous souhaite le bienvenue à cette lecture de poésie sur Zoom présentée par le Centre des Arts de Stanstead. Cette lecture de poésie est organisée par le centre dans les cantons de l'Est, région qui est sur un territoire traditionnel et non cédé du peuple Abénaki et de la Confédération Wabenaki. Nous sommes reconnaissants et fiers de faire partie d'une longue histoire de création et de partage d'histoire sur ces terres. This poetry reading comes to you from Stanstead in the Eastern Townships, the traditional and unceded territory of the Abenaki people and the Wabanaki Confederacy. We are grateful to be part of a long and proud history of creating and sharing stories on these lands. Just a request here, if your mic is open, maybe you could close it now because I can hear a few things. That would be helpful. If you can leave your camera open for now though, if you'd like. As you probably already know, if you've been here before, we alternate events. We usually have poets who write in French 1 week and then 2 weeks later, poets who write in English, though occasionally we indulge ourselves in combining poets in English and French. Today's event is in English and features the poets Kaie Kellough and Oana Avasilichioaei, both who are from Montreal and will be reading from Montreal. In just a minute, I'm going to explain how the event will unfold and give the poets a proper introduction. But first, we're going to have a word from Gabriel Safdie, who founded this series and who programs our English language events. Gabriel, it's over to you.
I just want to make a warm welcome to Oana Avasilichioaei and Kaie Kellough. There you go. And I'm very happy to have you both on our program. I think it's nice to have such a colorful and versatile duo reading, and I believe you've already had some exchange, or you've had some interaction in your work before. So I'm glad that you have another opportunity here. I think what stands out, in what I see that you bring to us, is a great deal of, a strong versatility in your work, so I won't go on about that because you're going to have some notes from very graphical notes from Shelly, but a warm welcome on the part of Centre des Arts de Stanstead. So please, Shelly. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabriel. So each poet will read for about 20 minutes, though I understand that Kaie and Oana are going to alternate and read each a bit and then go back and forth. So we invite you to close your mic and your camera during the reading. We will allow you to open it up at the very end of the event for some socializing, which sometimes lasts as long as the reading itself. And if you want to comment on a poem during the event, or if you have a question for the poets, your questions are very welcome. Just put your comments and questions in the chat section. And at the end of the reading, I will transmit them to the poets, and I'll have some questions of my own as well. At the end of the event, I'll remind you to open your mic and your camera so we can all see each other and have a little online get together. And now to introduce the poets. Oana Avasilichioaei interweaves poetry, translation, photography, sound, and performance to explore an expanded idea of language, polyphonic structures, and borders. Her 6 collections of poetry and poetry hybrids include 8-track, published by Talon Books, and a finalist for the A.M. Klein Prize for Poetry, and Liminal, Talon Books also. She has created many performance sound works, written a libretto for a 1-act opera, and translated 10 books of poetry and prose from the French and the Romanian, including Catherine Lalonde's The Fairy Devouring, published by Bookhug, which was awarded the Quebec Writer Federation's Cole Foundation Prize for Translation, and Bertrand Laverdure's Readopolis, published by Bookhug, for which she received a Governor General's Literary Award for translation. She is physically based in Montreal and virtually at oanalab.com. Kaie Kellough is a poet, fiction writer, and sound performer. He's written for small and large musical ensembles and has performed internationally. His most recent book of poetry, Magnetic Equator, published by McClelland and Stewart, won the 2020 Griffin Poetry Prize. He's currently working on sound and text. And actually, this is Kaie's book, the cover of Kaie's book, so you can see it. And this is the cover of Oana's book. So it'll look familiar to you next time you step into a bookstore. And with that, I think I will pass the virtual stage over to Kaie and Oana, and I'll see you all later.
Thanks, Shelly. Thanks for those introductions. Oana, I'm going to start things, right? Okay.
That's right. But
okay.
Hello, and then over to you, Kaie.
Okay, thank you, thank you. It's nice to see actually that our books are kind of color coordinated. There's like a green and light blue theme. So I think that's a good pairing. Yeah, I'm going to read exactly. There's a connection. I'm going to read a bit from Magnetic Equator, from a section that I usually don't read from, and I'll preface it, I guess, by saying something that I don't usually say about this book, which is that there are a few narrative threads that run through it. And some of the narrative threads, the reason that happened was because I was also writing some short fiction at the same time. And what happened was that the sentence sort of migrated from the short story into the poem, and it started to kind of trouble the structure of the poem. And the idea of character and some kind of narrative movement also migrated. But you know, with some of the freedom that you can approach those things within in poetry. So one of the things that I will say is that one of the narrative threads is about going back to Guyana, South America, on the trip with family to visit, of course, but also we had an urn with my Uncle Roger's ashes in it. So we're going to he had passed away, I think the year before, and we were going to take his ashes back to Guyana, which is the country of his birth and where he also grew up and spent a large part of his life. And I think he wanted to be there after having passed away. So that's one of the threads. And the other thing I'll say about the selections that I'll read today is just that they think a lot about place, and about three places particularly: Montreal a little bit, but also Calgary, Alberta, which is where I spent that raw and troubled part of adolescence that we all experience. And also Guyana, South America, which is the country of my maternal family and yeah, that side of my ancestry. And so the separation between those places isn't always like explicit. They kind of, this is from a section where the places start to overlap and one starts to appear in the other and one starts to populate the other. So if you experience a sense of disorientation and are wondering like, where is this poem set? Well, it's set in multiple places at once. So you're correct to experience that. One tectonic plate buckled under another, mountains. I have heard my relatives say they don't want to be buried in the cold ground, a refutation of this place where they have wintered years, a refutation of their own refusal here, a double negative, a final rebuke to issue, a final no. I refuse you who refused me forever. Stern confirmation that they must be laid to rest in the South American soil near the turning equator. This makes sense to me. This refusal, this remove, that they do not want this discriminating earth, that you can't own me forever. We sealed my uncle's ashes in their bamboo urn. After the disruptions of flight and customs, the jostling, sweating, the rumpled linen, the searches and questions, the delays, the bewildered eruptions, the rattling bone fragments, we planted his ashes in a green eternity, palms flinging their locks against burnished cobalt. Out, past the church gate, a curious goat roped to a stake at the dirt crossroads, the pastel ice cream concrete softening towards siesta, fronds lolling on the moist air. Uncle Roger's spirit could choose to rest or wander down one asphalt stretch and up another, gravel and dirt, until he reach the ocean, lime. Read the extended lines of cursive foaming on brown, surging to shore, double-spaced phalanxes of diaphanous prose. The palimpsest of the prairie, its bearded wheatgrass might have nodded to the rhythm of the King James. Wind's transparent wave riding blonde grass, invisible ink sweeping over the recursive curve. No detail of my life written in the narrows between the blades. I never cared to be a pastoral poet or a poet of small flatland longings, a poet of evangelical strictures, of social discredit, fire and brimstone apoplexies, but of equatorial revolutions, oceanic futures written in the veins of the vegetal, tenements of Babel dense with voices, languages spilling out over the summer windows onto the basketball drubbed asphalt of Little Burgundy, Montreal, the palimpsest city, one game played over another, one culture settled over another, English spoken over Creole, spoken over French, over each tenant a turned page in each apartment the idea of an island, repeating upward 20 stories, Creole meltdown simmering, pepper pot sweating in those horizontal tenements that stacked and shipped my ancestors across to islands, to new South American savannas, new rivers, new languages, new words fluttering in the mouth. Turbulence in a blue tango jet, buffeted by cloud, engines roaming in stereo, pursuing the logic of better must come, landing on this denuded, sparkling hinterland, flat slab of earth, before driving the long expressway in from the airport, crossing the Bow River, waiting in line for culture, another year, barely inching forward, in the semi-basement barber shop in a northeast strip mall, low rent drop ceiling and no cash register, next to Speedy Muffler, listening to dated dance hall hits, Beanie Man's slack stammer simmer, thinking, man, this is fucking nowhere, prairie nowhere, terminal starlight tour. Is this a beginning or a layover or turning back? Is this a beginning? Is it preferable to be erased, to have a voice that does not know the chorus because it sounds outside of the tradition, because it is stolen by the Chinook, or to have a dream of sweating in the malarial mud, swarmed by morphopleiades, sapphire butterflies, each one the spirit of an ancestor? Is it better to own a new bungalow in a new development, or to live where your name was born, where your memory has tongue? Is this the reckoning? Being between, turning between a newness of Mr. Clean and President's Choice, and choke and rob in the bloody dusk, between a full tank of gas and love in a time of bauxite strikes. I have to reckon with this far reach, this far flung, this beyond the perimeter, wandering latitudes of longing and ache, where there exists no critical authentic, no mass, nothing but blown fragments, and a Polaroid frozen at the departure gate, Timeri in 1973. I look up from my aunt's afro, out the sedan's window, mile markers, flashing fence posts and barbed wires slung between. Clouds, unconscious in their blind dreaming. The prairies stretch beyond death, baffle the compass. Earthen tongues ripple speechless under dead air, weightless volume of big sky. The foothills, humpbacked brown leviathan, surface and plunge, a volcanic hollow, une coulée de pensée, une coulée de lettres, une coulée de lave. The Athabasca Glacier recedes into prehistory, dinosaur ice trickling into time's crystalline wink. Reception weakening the further we, from the city, clear static, between stations, mountains as ancestors, blue teeth to the sun. History the complex of freedom and catastrophe, the found, the concrete, the territory, on the prairie, the lanes move, the lines shift, narrative swerves under cloud changing shape like a thought. I am the merest vehicle, great engine of tongues babbling toward a still point, a giant period, blackly riding the hill's humpbacked complexities, patterns beneath the formulaic speech, the attempt to unite landscape and immortality, talking to defeat direction, the pleasure of departure, the vexation of return, the road like a dream, out of the dark into the struggle, the new mornings so barren, furious outsider wandering the edge of the river valley, the whooping cranes that mate for life, the tyranny of this stolen narrative, the fields of grain shift. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kai. I love this book, and that's a great piece to open with. I love the overlay of the sites, because I think that really we are made of this non-chronological layering of different sites. So that was really great. So I'm going to start with some works from 8-track. So this in this book, I looked at I explored the various meanings of the word track and tracking in a wide range of ways, both textual, visual, and sonic. And each section of the book is preceded by a liner note that features one of the definitions of the word track. So I'll be reading some of those as I move along. So this is the first piece is from a section called Trackers, and the liner note is tracker, noun, a person who tracks someone or something by following their trail. The radar operator. Exist as history only, a blip in time, now obsolete. A dangerous blip, ricochet of approaching violence. To war or instigate or suffer in the long hours of silence. The load of seeing, a heavy burden, now deserted, now sparked into obedience. The flash of the signal spinning round and round. Creatured presence or mechanical tension, manufactured echolocation. And now I'm going to read from the very long last piece of the book that's called Tracking Animal. And the liner note is track, noun, a mark or marks left by a person, animal, or thing in passing. And I'm just going to do a few minutes of it in a kind of improvisational fashion. If others instinct the auto of my animal, an I bios. If at a juncture the animal is not automaton, not biographic, yet faceted here in the written, a set of signs, a howling belonging to its own metonymy. anima, automatic dialogue incantatory, or the subject of the animal justly, anima ought to be grasped. Between homo and animal, fronting or finite, I render animal. Animal in sense, animal in material, animal on the shore of itself, animal yet undefined, a lasting animal derived, defending in debris from its own definite. Animal Promethean for what it tends, rubs in motions, motives, animus, positing prowess from the promontory, this promised animal nature's tactile in elevating our domesticated tongues, deepening in temperature. Deepening so long and temperate, deepening in time, and for what rests in coming, we soar, passing the promise of this animal on the shore of itself. Deepening in temperament, does the animal regain us? Animal squall, silence. Silence, 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 regained, reined in, animal, as strangely animated. Known in a singular sign, the animal is not verily known, yet inseparable from the pitch of our configuration. The animal doggedly is not known because we know it. Because it knows without existing in knowing, the animal signs veers, though made voiceless, keeps voicing its own knowing. Animal scratches solitudes, animal spheres multitudes. An animal relates me. Intone your terror and recognize the animalized facility to vocalize morphemes and phonemes, animal tenor. Here, the you of the animal call is neutered before the I of fiction. Splayed out on this imaginative tableau, sorting, classifying taxonomies of beastly perspective. Situations of knowing animated, treatises of philosophica anima, animal call, unabundance. Animal voids, that is to say, animal domesticates. Command the animals by naming them, divide the animals by naming them. We, falsely liberal in our magnanimity of animal naming, animal over, nameful and nameless, the anima voids is apparent. Animus, all quantifiable. They, that is to say I, suspended there, that is to say my compassion. Deprive the animal of its manifest, its manifesting, the meme of experience long neutered. Disputing original animaling citation to mark an instant. Formulas of animal treatment, endlessly programmed and propagated, modern methodology transforming animal vivacity into leering objet. industrialization of elementary production of viable animal as per animal reduction, unprecedented proportions of this subjecting of the animal, human animal sovereign over animal protection, genociding the animal genius, animal proper, thus exterminated, over survival, over peoplement, industrial, mechanical, chemical, hormonal, genetic violence that subjugates vitality, mastering animal mortality. Animal drone, the osseous problematic of the anima animates the question, its form so animal. Sound, the mal of ma, decisively question the suffering sentence of animals. Animal regard, known before another. Decade, decadent with the autobiographical animal, with Annie, entrails, Annie, aggrandizement, abyss, between the singular, plural, animal appellation. Animals appeal. Back to you, Kai.
Whoa, thank you for that. That's awesome. It's always nice to read with you. Yeah. And okay, I'm gonna continue from the next section. The author's voice drones, harmonizes with the room's ambient hum, fuses with the electric zzz, amplified by a ventilation shaft. Its sawtooth wave climbs a doorframe, bores into ceiling panels, vibrates down to linoleum and rebounds up femurs, tibias, spinal columns, intracranial orifices, and drones on. A boy who does not belong in this faculty, in this book, in this time or place, who should not be remembered, stands and asks the mannered, middle-aged authors about writing and place, and whether they write from place, about place, to place, whether their sentences subsist against snow and suffer migraines when the Chinook arches its cloud-rippled dome airtight, shut over the drive-ins of southwestern Alberta, whether their lives are bounded by a reserve or by the trembling, rickety wooden homes that stagger around Victoria Park, Skid Row in the Saddle Dome's shadow. Autumn, 15 years later, without answer, he is speeding, seated, shot on a chrome greyhound, through golden farmlands at sunset, pink and orange beams streaming between leaves, scattering shadows across the directionless flatness. An asphalt strip divides the foothills, drives forward and back, between pasts and futures, wow and flutters, through towns inhabited by baseball caps and plaid shirts, by Tim Hortons, by belt buckles clinked locked above zippered Wranglers, by Ford pickups raising dust on old boy back roads, abandoned barns angled with the wind, cowboy hats adrift atop the rye grasses, fence posts bound by barbed wire, wooden churches whose doors open onto fire and boredom. I was wondering whether your writing is haunted by place. Does place matter? Do your letters inhabit locales? The writers circumnavigate the question. With smiles and gestures that dismiss, they write from everywhere at once or from nowhere exactly. And the only place is the imagination. The immediate port at which the next letter arrives, is detained, or vanishes. The imagination exists neither here nor there, is everywhere, which is here, which is nowhere. The letters rush into the Black Dipper, the great cipher of our gaping television sets. They come from nowhere. They ride the wheel of fortune. The price is irrelevant because an oil well bubbles in our backyards. Here is nothing but letters like constellations that predate suburbs and belong to no one. They simply exist and multiply in spite of no cluster of skyscrapers in the center of no city, no round tower revolving at the center of no still burbs, no bungalows stretching flatly, no foothills, no stupid mute sky yawning into no solar system, no specific context for our living, our violence, just the words suspended, turning in the air. I think differently in Montreal from how I did in Calgary. I write and dream in Georgetown, Guyana, with a flying fish carried on the frothed surge of a thought, a heron hunting iguana amid low bush, a god folded into the body of a golden frog, squatting in a puddle of dew at the heart of the giant bromeliad, two marble eyes beaming, creation into my electric cortex, my skull, a satellite dish in the backyard, curved and wondering, curved and receiving, a cup to catch abundance, a screen flickering at the drive-in, a pale yawn, waiting for a close encounter from the writing junks apart like a rust-gnawed Camaro parked in a prairie field, scoured by the bald sun, pierced by 1,000 grass spears flung up from the center of the earth. Nature's upward thrust slicing steel, the letters somersault, buffalo cascading off a cliff, legs pumping in air, falling, with the lost Demerara boy who stung his senses with white lightning and stumbled off the prairie's edge, hoping to tumble through space and splash into the Potaro, the Essequibo rivers, Kaiture's torrents, hanging spume, flecking blue and flying upward, a watery rewind to the dawn of his consciousness, cradled in the forest's folio, the golden frog concealed in the pool dew in the branching green frond of the giant bromeliad, watching. I don't know where I am in this writing, in this liquid page where the poem dissolves into molten gold and pours off a cliff, which isn't a poem, and I never could write one, and I don't want to ever be able to do that, because it would mean writing in the wrong tradition, alongside those who segregated anthologies, internalizing their derision, flattering a world shrunk to the contour of their cerebral convolutions. And no, I am not them. I am the not them who abides inside all they elide. I am not in their vocabulary. There exists no known tongue for my dissonance amid these low-tonguing hills, this sprawl of open silences, vacant thoughts, passages paved over. And I don't have anything kind to say about Calgary, circa 1985. Isn't that a tragedy? Because there are beautiful things there in that tragedy. And in the interest of being resourceful, I ought to mention them, since I owe my existence to oil and gas. What does it mean to be honest in this extraction? Does it mean nausea? The same words, stanzas, figures, royal, repeat, and sprawl. The same strip mall, the same gas station, the same concrete hills, identical monopoly bungalows breeding to the end of the same used words, same chain stores, box stores, the same automobiles shining in the immense parking lots, the cookie cutter children born to inherit the redundant vocabulary of vacuity, the same big sky, the paved vacancies between the constellations. Back to you.
Great, thanks, Kai. It's always great to read with you too. So I'm going to now actually do something I don't usually do either. I'm going to show a slideshow of some images from one of the photo series in the book. And this series is called Trackscapes, and the liner note is track now a rough path, especially one beaten by use. And as I will show this, slideshow, I'm going to read from the kind of a longer note, sort of a poetic essay in a way, at the back of the book in the note sections that I wrote about this piece. Trackscapes. Eyes, skin, bones, present, here. Blowing over the plateau from the west, a fierce evening wind slams into faces and bodies. The rickety stairs shake as I walk up the old observation tower. A blinding sun hovers low over the flat line of the horizon. As I reach the top, it happens. Awestruck, time dilates. The contours between my body, the wind, the flat rocky desert, the vault of the sky, and the lines blur and crystallize all at once. I'm no longer just a body, a gaze, standing apart from this environment, but within it, mingled, intertwined. The feeling is overwhelming, ecstatic, humbling. The next morning, I'm in a 6-seater plane flying low over the lines, and the feeling is present and just as strong. I look through the camera's viewfinder frame and press the shutter button, composed with a gaze that has become interior, both within and without. Add another layer to the existing and reverberating palimpsest of the lines, forms, terrain, reflections of clouds and sky. Try to find a continuum between their ancient echo and the alien presence of my lens. The líneas y geoglifos de Nazca y Palpa, or the Nazca lines, lie in the pampa of southern Peru, an arid plain nestled between the foothills of the Andes and the coast in a region that is today part of the broader Quechua-Quichua territory. Created roughly between 100 BCE and 700 CE, the dates vary, by the Nazca people, a name given to them by archaeologists, for their language has not been preserved, so it's impossible to know what they called themselves. They shaped giant drawings out of the desert, tracking the contours of dry, rocky landscape over hundreds of square kilometers. At ground level, the lines look like furrows or shallow trenches dug into the earth, only readable as lines from certain angles or hilltops. From the air, however, they coalesce and disperse into vast geoglyphs of plant and animal figures, hundreds of triangles, trapezoids, spirals, zigzags, cleared areas, and thousands of radiating rays and straight lines. As this is one of the driest regions in the world, the natural elements have preserved the lines over centuries, though some have been damaged by human disregard. It was only in 1994 that the líneas y geoglifos de Nazca y Palpa were declared a UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site. Many have speculated on their purpose, the more current thought being that they were ceremonial and related to water rituals. The Nazca left waterworks and aqueducts still used today, and the cleared areas functioning as open-air temples. The wanderer Bruce Chatwin called them a totemic map, and poet and artist Cecilia Vicuña a libro desierto, or desert book. In adding my voice, to those who have worked from this desert book, my intent is not to tell or document, for their story is not mine to tell. I can only visually attend to a story whose messages may have floundered in the floods and been buried in the earthquakes and wars that by the 8th century had decimated the Nazca. I bear presence to their abstraction, the constantly shifting drawing shaped by interactions between sky, environment, topography, perspective, and traces of human movement. In our world, so many meanings of track or tracking are negative, oppressive. The líneas de Nazca stand in stark contrast to offer positive traces of human endeavor and survival. At the same time, they expose limitations of Western or Northern views and voices. They point to knowledge systems that valorize an intimate and necessary relationship to the ecosystems of the region. They trace a sense of connectedness, integrity, interconnection, an interwoven palimpsest of relationships with other people, animals, symbolic structures, the environment, and water. The lines are communal, for they required a group of people to make them, and they inspire movement and migration, necessary human acts. So I will just finish with 3 small pieces from my current project, which is called Chamber Sonic, is the larger overall project, and I'm looking at exploring voice and scores and different ways in which voice exists again through textual, sonic, and visual means. And this is from a series that started called Improbable Theaters. And I'm just going to read 3 little pieces. Speculative theater. This play begins at the end and ends at the beginning. Its performing space is spherical and in constant motion. The performers and spectators bounce inside it like balls in a bingo machine until one is randomly selected and extracted from the sphere, i.e., the performing space. The play ends once all spectators and performers exeunt via this random method, and the sphere is left empty. Illusory theater. In the late hours of night or early hours of morning, they enter a vibrational space. The room, if indeed it can be called a room, is large, square, and features an interminable ceiling, walls scarred and scored by perhaps years' worth of accumulated sonic indentations, and a murky floor they can almost sink into. The room, such as it is, while not full, is not entirely empty either. An allegorical presence hovers in the air, which isn't exactly air, but more like a viscous atmosphere of longing. The light is dim, as though suspended in that fleeting moment before dusk becomes night or night becomes dawn. Upon entering, they know instantly that they will never belong to this space, and yet feel an almost violent urge to remain. Gradually, it becomes evident that the walls are not solid, but rather layers of semi-transparent screens, backgrounds, or foregrounds, for a play of shadow and light, transmitters, or receivers, for a dialogue, or chorus, monologue, voiceover of sonic material. And on the other side of the screens, all around, are the performers, or so those who have made their entrance initially think. Their indistinct shapes moving and gesturing with a pulsating presence, as though silently pointing, or silently clapping, or cupping their mouths to silently boo and hiss. Those ushered in, ostensibly as the audience, thus find themselves in the middle of the space, arguably center stage, and therefore on display, performing for those behind, or rather in front of the screens. Their entrance signals the start of the performance. It remains unclear whether their exit will signal its end, or even how or when they will be able to exit. Theoretical theater. This theater aspires to be pure dialogue. Between a speeding train and the horizon, between the method and the prop, between ambient and monophonic chant, between a chorus and the extras, between a fragmentary interlude and a buttressed citizenry, between a failed metaphor and a desire to believe, between the megaphone and the gag, between the chatter and the conversation, between a mountain pass and some lambs, between a body's gestures and the floodlights, between the margins and the edgy, between the action upstage and the acts offstage, between the undertone and the utterance, between the backdrop and the spilled ink, between the riotous and the listened, between now and now. Thank you. So that's it. I think you can all return.
Thanks very much. Kai, were you going to read again, or you're done?
No, I think I'm done. I think we both that was what we planned.
Okay, that's
yeah.
great. Thank you both. Oana, we had a question about the images that you showed us of the Nazca lines. Did you take those photographs yourself?
Yes. I took them from.
Oh, you did.
They're aerial photographs. I took them from the 6-seater plane.
Pretty amazing.
Wow.
Thank you.
And just to ask, you two have read before, right? You've done readings before, but have you actually collaborated on an event, creating something together before?
We have. Kai, do you want to talk about it, or should I?
Yeah, we can both, I guess. I mean, we did a project where Oana did a soundscape, and I put the words in it. And we performed it at, so it was recorded, video and audio, at the Lion d'Or, was last year?
It was in October, I think, in the fall, maybe, or in the summer, I don't know.
Yeah, because it seems to me that did we have masks at that time?
We didn't. Well, we did have masks, but we were able to do the performance like without them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah. I seem to remember it being like a more innocent time, and COVID hadn't made the progress that it's made now.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, it's part of a larger. It's supposed to be part of a larger installation that's being put together by this organization in Quebec City called Rhizome, and the whole work is called Sharda, or choirs, and our pairing is part of it.
Okay, but it's not available yet.
It's not available yet. No.
We have to wait for the pandemic to end, I guess.
Yes.
And what have you been working on lately? Kai, what have you been working on? You were recording something recently, correct?
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Yana Radford's partner, Peter Burton, he helped to, I guess, put together this, or to involve us in this project, which was for the National Arts Centre and some Canadian jazz festivals that were kind of on board with it, and then a jazz festival in Europe, in Bremen. And so we recorded audio video of a 7-piece ensemble, so 6 musicians and vocalists plus a visual projections. And so we composed about a 40-minute piece with text, visual projections, and composed music for several instruments. And we just recorded that. And so that's going to premiere on April 29th. So we're pretty excited about that. It was really nice to be, I mean, all of us, we just finished it recently, and we had a sizable venue rented out so that we could do it in a socially distanced and safe way. But all of us were just marveling at how nice it was and how refreshing it was to be in a venue after so long, and to be able to, well, just be in the venue was one thing, right? But then the other thing was just to be able to just make sound in a collective fashion. That was restorative. Yeah.
Not to be isolated alone in an apartment. I watched a play the other online, and there were like 20 actors in it, and each one was alone in their apartment. It's must be nice to share a space together.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because I had an experience of writing a play and watching it be produced for television much earlier this year. And we did it all through Zoom. So all of the dramaturging process was done Zoom. When they actually got in the theater and had the set up and then were filming it, it was like I was on a computer screen that was turned toward the stage. And I was like a little square on the screen watching the actors do takes of their parts. It was just bizarre. So it was kind of disconnecting, but that's the latest project. So
yeah, like much of life is disconnecting and disconnected these days. And Oana, what project have you been working on lately?
Yeah, the most recent thing is I just had a residency at Oboro, which is a media arts center here in Montreal, and I'm working. The piece is not done yet, but I made a good start in it. It's an octophonic sound installation, so that means 8 speakers, kind of surround sound, and I'm basically composing this sonic installation piece, and it's actually based on some of the drawings that are behind me. That's my score for the piece.
And it's all electronics?
It's a mixture of electronics, a lot of recordings of objects, actually, using a lot of objects and sound mics and some theremin, some kind of this weird little harp. But it's all, I'm producing all of the sound, and it's, exactly.
Okay. You're both, obviously, I mean, this is where you intersect. I think you're both interested in performance and in sound. Can you talk about, both of you really, the connection between sound performance and poetry? I would imagine there's a pretty close connection. You could start, Oana.
Definitely. I think for me, I'm really interested in how language gets activated and works on the page, and then and how the way our bodies and eyes and how we read it, what it does to it, and that through that interaction. And then I'm, as a corollary to that, I'm interested in what happens to language when it's, in this live, ephemeral, fleeting. It's put in this, but it's put in a body and a voice, and so the differences between those two spaces, but also what they echo or what they carry from one another. I'm really interested in exploring that, and I've worked a lot from, I guess, doing a kind of translation between those two spaces, but in sort of often in the direction from starting as my anchor point being inscribed text, but I'm more recently been worked on a number of pieces that my anchor, that it's gone in the other direction as well. So, yeah.
And you, Kai?
Yeah, I'd say I have some similar concerns. I mean, I think, what the things that sit between text and performance are volume and physicality, right? Because it's nice to work with volume, it's nice to be able to turn up the volume, but it's also nice to work without the volume on. And it's also nice to work in a medium that is physical and is dependent on presence. But it's also nice to remove oneself from presence and not have that need encroach upon your practice. And so, yeah, I mean, those are I think two of the main things that provide the attraction or the repellent quality to one form or the other, you know, depending on what you're looking for in a given moment. But yeah.
I just wonder about this period where you it's very rare. I mean, obviously recently you've had the experience of being in a space with people, but not having that physicality, whether it makes you look at performance differently right now, whether it's changed the way you look at it.
Well, you know, I like sometimes not having the physicality, right? There's just writing is wonderful. And sometimes I crave that. One of the things though, this is not a very like intellectual kind of insight, but I would have to say that being in that space okay, thank you. With people is, I came away from that telling myself like, never take this for granted. It felt so good and it was so restorative and so refreshing and so just nourishing that I told myself never to really undervalue that, you know, in the future. I guess experiences like that make you grateful. But, you know, one of the things that the performance has too is that it's mediated technologically, and it can't really be carried off sometimes without that kind of mediation. And so when it comes to volume, the nice thing is that performance can be carried out at a volume that exceeds what the human body could produce by itself. So you can turn it up. And that is kind of extraordinary and magical. And that quality to performance is what I love. But text is compelling too, because it doesn't depend on a particular medium that is related to one sense. So in performance, there's sound, and there's you know, you see what's being performed. So there's sound and sight. But when you're writing, you don't actually hear anything. And although you see the letters, you don't actually see the things they're describing. So if I write about a chair and a table or a dining room, I see letters, but it's in my mind's eye that I have to perceive the dining room. I have to imagine what the dining room looks like. And that kind of sort of abstractedness, that abstract quality to writing is really wonderful. It provides so many incredible challenges, and it's what makes the writing process so rich.
I have to say, this is also for both of you. In reading your work and also listening to you, but in reading it before, you're both so prolific and your writing is so rich and complex. And I wonder, are there ever times when you don't have a poem in mind? I mean, are there desert periods for you? Somehow it seems to me that that doesn't happen to you, I would imagine.
No, I mean, it's not, for me, it's not like, I think I'm always, I'm always trying to retain a connection to, I guess, my creative space and so, but that might not necessarily mean that I'm actually, you know, doing some writing. It might actually mean also, because I think for both Kaie and I, because we work a little bit across media, so sometimes it's more that, you know, maybe I'm working on a sound, but it could also be that I'm reading and I'm thinking, or it could be that I'm going for a walk. But I feel for me, it's what I try to keep at a constant, and I don't always succeed, and I do have time periods for various reasons where that fails a bit, but I really try to keep a constant of retaining a connection to whatever that creative space is in the whatever moment, and that's really important for me. So that would say that connection is my dailiness, rather than, you know, actual writing or having a poem in mind or.
Kaie?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking, I was watching a movie. I didn't actually realize that it was a Woody Allen movie until the end of it last night. So I don't know if I would have watched it otherwise, but because we had, like, last night we were on like browsing Netflix or something, and we had started a movie with Woody Harrelson in it. And then when the credits for and we didn't like it. So then when the next movie came on and the credits for the next movie came on, Melissa, my partner, was like, oh, it's another Woody. And I thought, oh, Woody Harrelson again, right? Like I didn't look up. I was eating something, so I didn't look up. I was like, oh, okay, Woody Harrelson again. And I kept waiting for the whole movie to see Woody Harrelson, but he didn't show up. And then at the end, she told me it was I was like, seems so much like a Woody Allen movie. And she's like, it was a Woody Allen movie. I told you that. But the point being that there's a figure of the writer in the movie. There was Josh Brolin in it, and he was playing a writer who was, he had some successes with an early novel, and then he had kind of floundered after that. And he was a bit of a freeloader, you know, working on this interminable project that was never coming to fruition, and drinking and, you know, frustrated and depressed and not doing anything, driving a limousine and getting in car accidents, and that figure of the writer who is focused exclusively on one thing and is in a state of perpetual writer's block and is, you know, is on the downward slope psychologically and in terms of their habits. I was thinking about that figure and that sort of character in movies. It's a real cliche, but I've never, like Oana said, I mean, you know, working in other areas and mediums and doing other things, other artistic mediums and just doing other things outside of that, I think keeps creativity fresh, you know, and keeps the process lubricated, shall I say. Just too much focus on the one thing and you'll be Josh Brolin. So yeah, avoid that.
I don't think we'd want you to be Josh Brolin. Either of you. I think I don't see any questions aside from the question about the Nazca lines, though there are lots of compliments for you in there if you have a look at the chat. So I think we'll wrap up the conversation here unless a question pops up really quickly. So I'd like to thank you both, Kaie and Oana. And just to remind everybody, Kaie's latest book is Magnetic Equator, and Oana's latest poetry collection is 8-track. And if you would like to watch or listen to this event again, or you want to send it to a friend, or any of the other events in the series, you can go to the YouTube channel of the Centre des Arts de Stanstead. You'll find the links that I'm going to mention are at the top of the chat. And you can also look on the Centre des Arts de Stanstead's Facebook page, and that's where we post the readings. Our next reading is Saturday, May 8th at 4 p.m. With France Mongeau and Geneviève Letarte, and that's an event in French. And we're still debating whether we're going to have an event on May 29th, whether people will be indoors at all at the end of May, but we will keep you posted about that. Before we wind up our event, I would first of all like to thank the team at the Centre des Arts de Stanstead, Sharda Guptar, who makes sure that everything goes well on Zoom, Luce Couture, Diane Régimbald, and Gabriel Safdie. And Gabriel, I think, is going to say a closing word for us now. Gabriel, are you there? There he is.
I am here. I'm here. Well, hello. And first of all, I really appreciate this very stimulating discussion, Shelly, and very really interesting. This description of how you work and the elements of the way you work and so on. So I think that was very interesting indeed, and really, Oana, well, from the soaring imagination that you've taken me to, and the Nazca lines, and down to the the subliminal world of animal. I think that it's really given us a very rich range of perspective and really deep poetry. And Kaie, I think that you really resonate for me in terms of your sense of place. I think it's extraordinary how evocative you've been, and how rich that imagery and this shifting of time, place, and so on in terms of your own history and that of so many of us, really. So thank you so much, the two of you, and well, we'll see you again one day, I hope. And in the meantime, I really want to put this in the context of where this comes from and where this event belongs. It is a pleasure to welcome you all again. It's a 17th, I believe, event that we're having. And this is for the Centres Arts de Stanstead. We are the charitable organization based in Stanstead in the Eastern Townships of Quebec, and our mission is to bring culture and the arts to Stanstead, the townships, and beyond. The idea came to me to start the poetry series as a reaction to the shutdown and imposed cancellations of our live events owing to the pandemic. We're now happy to see that the poetry series has established itself successfully and has been gaining popularity, and we're keen to continue with this series once the public programming resumes, which, wherever that is, which we were hoping would happen in the spring, and well, still maybe in June, because we were going to have an event in May, but it'll come. And do consult our website for any information about the Centre news and upcoming events, because there will be some eventually. And meanwhile, we are in the process of working towards securing a financial support, both public and private, for the reconstruction of Théâtre Sans Frontières, the All Border Theatre, and there's a strong fundraising drive that is on right now. So let us hope we get our theatre soon enough. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Oana. And to the whole team.